Welcome back, ghost lovers and fearless explorers. If you've stumbled upon this video and haven't watched the first two parts of North Carolina's most haunted places, what are you even doing? Go back, watch them, and then come back here. Unless you like being haunted by unfinished stories. Don't say I didn't warn you. Now, for those of you who have been following along like true ghost hunting pros, welcome to part 3 of the most haunted locations in North Carolina. At this point, I feel like we should have our own little paranormal club. Membership includes chills, possible nightmares, and an overwhelming urge to never visit abandoned buildings alone. Sounds fun, right? Before we dive into even more ghostly goodness, do me a favor. If you love ghost stories, haunted history, and places that make your spine tingle, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe. This is what I do, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Some of these places are so haunted, even ghosts are like, nah, I'm out. In this episode, we're exploring some of the eeriest spots yet. Places with dark pasts, restless spirits, and stories that'll make you double-check your locks tonight. You might even start questioning every creaky floorboard in your house. Is it just old wood settling, or is something watching you? So grab your popcorn, turn off the lights if you dare, and let's get into it. All right, let's do this. Welcome to Screamville. Let's talk about the Duke Mansion. Back in 1915, a well-to-do gentleman by the name of Zebulon V. Taylor strolled through the up-and-coming suburb of Myers Park in Charlotte and thought, yep, this looks like a fine place to drop some cash. With the streetcar making the area more accessible, he saw potential and bought himself a nice little piece of property. Mr. Taylor, who was the big boss at Southern Public Utilities, now known as Duke Energy, decided to build a house on his new land and named it Linwood Mansion. However, many folks mistakenly believe the mansion was built by its most famous owner, James Buchanan Duke. Nope, Duke didn't lay a single brick. He just had the cash and a vision. In 1919, Duke swooped in, looking for a property to continue his booming hydroelectric business and introduce his daughter Doris to Southern high society. Naturally, he bought Linwood and, like any self-respecting businessman, decided bigger is better. So, he expanded the mansion by a casual 32,000 square feet. The original house? It's now just the east wing. While living there, Duke wasn't just enjoying the lavish estate. He was busy brainstorming ideas that would lead to Duke University, Duke Energy, and the Duke Endowment. No big deal. Just changing the world from the comfort of his oversized mansion. When Duke passed away in 1925, a local businessman named C.C. Coddington took over the property the next year. His resume? Owning a radio station and a Buick dealership, because why not? However, he must not have been too attached because just 3 years later, he sold it to Martin Cannon. Cannon decided the house needed a fresh start and renamed it White Oaks when he moved in around 1929. The Cannon family loved their grand estate and repeatedly turned down offers from developers who saw dollar signs in Charlotte's growing landscape. But, like all good things, their ownership eventually came to an end when the Linebergers took over a few decades later. In 1966, disaster struck. Fire engulfed the mansion's 3rd floor, turning it into a smoldering mess. Fortunately, Henry and Clayton Lineberger took on the painstaking task of restoring the entire top level, bringing it back to its former glory. Then, in the late 1970s, someone had the bright idea to chop the mansion into 5 separate condos. At one point, there was even a plan to divide the land further and fill it with single-family homes. Thankfully, that plan never happened. Because let's be real, turning a historic mansion into a cookie-cutter neighborhood would have been a crime against architecture. In 1989, Dee and Rick Ray, founders of Raycom Sports, toured the property, intending to buy just one of those condos. But after walking through, they had a go big or go home moment and decided to buy the entire mansion instead. Over time, they restored it to a single-family home, undoing the condo experiment. By the mid-1990s, it became clear the house needed constant upkeep to preserve its history. A non-profit was created to manage its care, ensuring it wouldn't fall into disrepair again. But one thing hadn't changed. The locals never called it White Oaks. They simply referred to it as the old Duke Mansion. And well, the name stuck. The Duke Mansion is a well-known and beloved gem in the community, but what many people don't know is that it comes with a little extra spiritual charm. Yep, this historic property is haunted. The ghost in question, a man named John Avery who briefly owned the mansion in the gap between the Cannon and Lineberger families. And let's just say, Mr. Avery's time at White Oaks was anything but sunshine and roses. John lived there with his mother and sister, who helped him manage the property, and presumably his emotional well-being. His wife, unfortunately, suffered from severe mental health issues and was living in an institution at the time. Life was not easy for Mr. Avery. One day, a young writer reached out, eager to do a story on the grand estate. John agreed to give her a tour, and cue the romantic music, the two hit it off immediately. Sparks flew, and what started as a friendly stroll around the mansion quickly turned into deep conversations, stolen glances, and the kind of emotional connection Nicholas Sparks would write about. But there was a problem. Mr. Avery, ever the honorable man, refused to abandon his sick wife. When the young lady realized their love could never become official, she made the painful decision to cut ties. Heartbroken, John begged her for one last meeting, 1 year later at midnight, in the garden. But there was a catch. She had to promise to meet him, dead or alive. A year passed, and life went on. The woman found happiness elsewhere, got engaged, and probably thought, "Whew, glad I moved past that melodrama." But a promise is a promise. So she returned to White Oaks, bringing her skeptical roommate as backup. As midnight approached, she started to doubt that John would show, but just as she was about to leave, footsteps echoed from the mansion. Out of the darkness, John appeared, dressed in formal black attire, looking as somber as ever. She reached out to touch his arm, but something was off. He turned to her, lips moving, but instead of hearing his voice in the air, she heard it in her head. "Dead or alive?" he whispered. Then, without another word, he walked past her and disappeared into the night. Creepy? Yes. But here's the kicker. John had actually died a few days before the meeting. On his deathbed, he repeatedly asked if he'd be well enough to keep his promise. Turns out death wasn't enough of an excuse to cancel a date. Love, as they say, never dies. But in John Avery's case, it just got a little more ghostly. Standing tall in the heart of Wilmington, North Carolina, the Bellamy Mansion isn't just a stunning example of antebellum architecture. It's a front-row seat to the past, complete with ghostly season tickets. Built between 1859 and 1861, this southern masterpiece has survived everything from the Civil War to modern tourists who can't resist touching things they shouldn't. But let's be real. People don't just visit for the fancy ironwork and grand columns. They come for the ghosts. Because what's a historic mansion without a few spectral roommates? Dr. John D. Bellamy, a prominent physician and planter, commissioned the mansion as a symbol of his family's wealth and social status. Little did he know that his grand home would serve as both a luxurious residence for his kin and a permanent timeshare for the dearly departed. Among the mansion's lingering spirits, none is more infamous than Ellen Bellamy, the last family member to call the house home. And apparently, she's still calling it home. Ellen was a devoted bookworm and family historian, spending much of her later years tucked away in her bedroom, surrounded by novels and nostalgia. When she passed in 1946, she didn't so much leave the mansion as upgrade to a ghostly timeshare. One of the weirdest and oddly charming signs of Ellen's presence is the mysterious reappearance of smudge marks near her bedside sconce. These ink-like stains, supposedly left by her fingers as she turned off her light, refused to go away. No matter how often the spot is cleaned or repainted, the smudges just keep coming back. It's as if Ellen is still up reading every night, refusing to put her book down even in the afterlife. Visitors who dare to explore the upper floors often report seeing a woman in period attire gliding silently through rooms or peering out of windows. Is she keeping watch over her beloved home? Is she judging your outfit choices? Who's to say? But one thing's for sure, Ellen Bellamy isn't done with the Bellamy Mansion, and if history is any indication, she's not planning to check out anytime soon. The paranormal activity at Bellamy Mansion isn't just limited to Ellen's book-loving ghost. It's a full-on supernatural variety show. The walls practically hum with eerie energy, and if you stick around long enough, you might just find yourself rethinking everything you thought you knew about the afterlife. Visitors, skeptics, and seasoned ghost hunters alike have reported sudden, unexplained cold spots that could make even the bravest shiver in their boots. One second, you're comfortably warm. The next, you're standing in an invisible freezer, wondering if a ghost just walked through you. Even creepier, That unmistakable feeling of being watched because apparently some spirits at Bellamy have nothing better to do than stare at guests like judgmental Victorian grandmothers. And then there are the voices, disembodied whispers, commanding shouts, and even the laughter of unseen children drift through the empty rooms. It's like the ghosts are throwing their own eternal dinner party, and we're just the uninvited guests. But perhaps the most dramatic of all is the mansion's love for slamming doors. One particularly spine-chilling moment involved a film crew working inside the house when the massive front door suddenly slammed shut with a force that would make even the wind jealous. A frigid gust followed, sweeping through the mansion as if the spirits were really unhappy with their screen time. If the main house is the star of the paranormal show, the slave quarters are the emotional gut punch that reminds us of the mansion's complicated past. Electronic voice phenomena, EVP recordings, have picked up what sounds like the stern, no-nonsense voice of Dr. Bellamy himself, still barking orders from beyond the grave, because apparently even death hasn't convinced him to retire. On the gentler side, a spirit believed to be Sarah, a former servant, has been captured in recordings responding to investigators. Her voice carries a warmth that suggests she's still attached to the home in some way. Perhaps out of fondness, perhaps out of habit, or maybe because ghosts don't get vacation days. Adding an eerie but oddly wholesome twist, ghostly children seem to be keeping the afterlife playful. Laughter echoes in the corridors, and a toy penny whistle's trill has been recorded, as if the Bellamy kids never quite realized that time has marched on without them. While the main house gets most of the attention, it's the slave quarters that hold the most powerful and haunting echoes of history. These spaces, so often overshadowed by the grandeur of antebellum mansions, have become a focal point for paranormal investigators searching for voices that refuse to be forgotten. The Bellamy Mansion isn't just a stunning example of antebellum architecture, it's also proof that some folks just really don't know when to clock out. Built on the eve of the Civil War, this grand home found itself caught in the chaos of history when Union soldiers decided to make themselves at home, leaving behind more than just scuff marks on the floors. Even today, visitors report hearing the unmistakable thud-thud-thud of heavy boots pacing across the wooden floors, like a ghostly drumline that just won't quit. Some say it's the restless spirit of a Union sentry, still patrolling the halls, perhaps waiting for his shift to end, which, unfortunately, it never will. If you listen closely, you might even hear the ghostly sigh of a soldier who just realized he's been working unpaid overtime for over 150 years. Despite the occasional spectral foot traffic, the Bellamy Mansion's ghosts are surprisingly well-mannered. Unlike the spirits in more sinister haunted locations, the resident ghosts here don't seem interested in scaring anyone out of their wits. No ominous whispers saying "get out," no poltergeist-style furniture flipping, just some light door slamming, cold spots, and the occasional eerie chuckle from invisible children. It's less horror movie and more historic Airbnb, except the former guests never left. So why are these spirits so attached to the place? Maybe Ellen Bellamy just really loved her house. Maybe the former servants still feel a duty to keep things tidy. Maybe the ghostly children are just having too much fun pranking visitors. Whatever the reason, these spirits seem more nostalgic than nefarious, forever reliving their past instead of meddling in the present. Today, the Bellamy Mansion is both a historical landmark and a paranormal playground, where visitors can step back in time and possibly step into a cold spot left by a lingering spirit. With guided tours and ghost hunts, you can experience firsthand what it's like to share space with the undead. And if you close your eyes as night falls, you might just hear the distant sounds of a long-forgotten dinner party, the scurry of servants tending to their duties, or the measured footsteps of a Union soldier still standing watch, completely unaware that his war ended a long, long time ago. In the end, the ghosts of Bellamy Mansion aren't just lingering specters, they're history itself, whispering their stories through creaking floorboards and flickering lights. So, whether you're here for the architecture, the history, or the hauntings, just remember, you're never really alone at Bellamy Mansion. During the early 1900s, the good folks of Statesville, North Carolina realized they had a bit of a problem. If you needed medical attention, your best bet was a strong will and a lot of luck. Enter Dr. James Davis, a surgeon with big dreams and probably a very full schedule of house calls. He teamed up with Dr. F.A. Carpenter, a local ear, nose, and throat specialist, to tackle the issue head-on. Their solution? Build a hospital. By 1920, their vision became a reality, and the Carpenter-Davis Hospital opened its doors, ushering in a new era where medical care didn't require a doctor showing up at your front porch with a black bag and a grim expression. The hospital boasted a whopping 35 beds, state-of-the-art for the time, and a dedicated team of nurses, assistants, and associate doctors ready to lend a hand, or a stethoscope. Before long, the hospital proved to be an absolute game-changer for Statesville and the surrounding communities. People quickly realized that having a designated place for medical care was way better than hoping the traveling doctor made it to your house before your fever did you in. The Carpenter-Davis Hospital wasn't just a medical facility, it was the future of healthcare in town. Not long after opening the hospital, Dr. Davis and Dr. Carpenter decided that saving lives wasn't keeping them busy enough. So they started a nursing school. Because what's better than 2 doctors? A whole army of them. They shared their knowledge, recruited new staff, and kept things running like a well-oiled medical machine. Always ahead of the curve, the staff at Davis Hospital embraced cutting-edge medical techniques and the latest technology, or at least whatever counted as high-tech in the 1920s. Dr. Davis and Dr. Carpenter were even pioneers in organizing blood donation services, creating one of the first blood banks, because it turns out having extra blood on hand is a pretty good idea when you're in the business of saving lives. And if that wasn't impressive enough, they also launched one of the first 24/7 emergency services departments. No more waiting until business hours to have your broken leg looked at. But by 1925, it was obvious that their little hospital was bursting at the seams. So, like any successful business, they upgraded, purchasing a larger building to keep up with the growing demand. Dr. Davis passed away in 1955, but his name and legacy lived on. In 1984, Statesville's hospital evolved into Davis Regional Medical Center, continuing to serve the community with modern medical care and emergency services. But what about that original, humble yet groundbreaking hospital? Well, it was left abandoned, left to fend for itself against time, weather, and the occasional over-enthusiastic teenager looking for a spooky adventure. It didn't take long for graffiti artists to claim its walls and ghost stories to take root. Over time, the building gained a reputation, not just as a relic of medical history, but as one of the most haunted places around. Because what's a good abandoned hospital without a few restless spirits? As if an abandoned hospital wasn't creepy enough, visitors who dared to trespass started reporting something truly unsettling. The faint cries of a baby echoing through the empty hallways. And unless this was some kind of really committed prank, things were about to get spooky. Word spread fast, and soon locals were treating the place like a haunted house attraction, minus the safety regulations. But the hospital wasn't just an old building. At night, it seemed to take on a life of its own. Doors opened and shut by themselves, windows rattled as if unseen hands were playing with them. And the real kicker? The voices. People claimed to hear not just the mysterious crying baby, but other disembodied voices as well. Some just whispers, others full-blown screams of agony. Then there were the heavy footsteps echoing through the halls and the loud banging of unseen hands on medical counters. You know, just your typical nightmare fuel. If horror movies have taught us anything, it's that nothing good happens in a morgue, and Davis Hospitals was no exception. Many visitors reported that this section was always unnaturally cold, no matter how hot it was outside. Step inside during the peak of summer and suddenly, you're in a walk-in freezer of pure terror. Unsurprisingly, this was also the hot spot for ghostly activity, muffled voices, unexplained noises, and an eerie sense of being watched. Meanwhile, the infamous crying baby? That sound was usually heard in the pediatric ward, where things got extra creepy. Many people who ventured inside claimed to feel a powerful presence, one that filled them with dread. Some described it as angry, even violent. And those with heightened empathic abilities weren't convinced it wouldn't lash out at unsuspecting visitors. And then there's the legend of Dr. Davis himself. Some believe that after his death he refused to check out of the hospital he built. Since his body was buried on the property for 3 decades, it's easy to imagine his spirit still roaming the halls, keeping watch over his legacy. Or maybe just making sure no trespassers tried to book an unauthorized overnight stay. As the old hospital continued its slow transformation from abandoned to haunted-looking, thrill seekers kept sneaking in while the Statesville community argued over what to do with the crumbling building. At this point, it was way past its prime, too far gone to be anything useful unless you counted being a set for a low-budget horror film. Some locals complained about its decaying exterior, calling it an eyesore, while others likely enjoyed the spooky aesthetic. Finally, in 2015, a decision was made. A company from South Carolina was brought in to tear the place down. Some residents cheered, relieved to see the ghostly relic go, while others were a little less enthusiastic, especially when they realized what was lurking inside the walls. You see, the hospital wasn't just filled with dust and old memories. It was packed with asbestos, the kind of stuff that makes people go, "Wait, should we be breathing this?" Since asbestos exposure has been linked to lung cancer, folks living nearby weren't thrilled at the idea of toxic dust flying around like confetti. Neocorp, the demolition company, assured everyone that it would all be safely handled. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Halfway through the demolition, everything came to a screeching halt when the EPA stepped in for a month-long investigation in 2016. Turns out the locals had a point. Neocorp hadn't exactly handled the asbestos situation as promised. So the hospital just sat there looking even more tragic than before, half demolished and fully abandoned for over 2 years. At last, in 2018, demolition resumed, and today, Davis Hospital is no more. The property was scooped up by Mitchell Community College, which is now using the land for a new healthcare center. So, in a poetic twist, the site of a failed hospital will eventually help train future medical professionals. Let's just hope they take better care of their patients than Neocorp did of that asbestos. Fort Fisher, standing tall, well, as tall as an earth and sand fort can, near the Cape Fear River, was one of the largest forts built in the South. Its entrance is as intimidating as a bouncer at an exclusive club, and the surrounding giant oaks look like ancient sentinels, silently judging passers-by with their gnarled branches. Unlike your typical brick-and-mortar fort, Fort Fisher was made of earth and sand because, as it turns out, dirt is surprisingly good at absorbing cannon blasts. The fort's ramparts soared 32 feet high, connected by secret underground passages and an old-school telegraph system, the 1860s version of a group chat. More than 1,000 men toiled to build this behemoth, and when it was done, it boasted 22 guns aimed at the ocean and another 25 ready to ruin someone's day on land. By 1864, Wilmington was the last major seaport still open for business in the Confederacy, sneaking in supplies like a rebellious teenager sneaking past curfew. Every other southern port had either been blockaded or taken over by Union forces, making Wilmington the VIP entrance to keep Robert E. Lee's troops fed and fighting. The only thing keeping it open? Good old Fort Fisher. Then came Christmas Eve 1864, when Union forces decided to crash the party with cannons instead of carols. They bombarded the fort through Christmas Day, but Fort Fisher held strong. Not ones to take a hint, the Union came back in January 1865 with an even bigger game plan. After nearly 3 days of non-stop bombing, think of it as the worst fireworks display ever, over 3,300 Union soldiers stormed the fort. Outnumbered and exhausted, the Confederate forces lost Fort Fisher by nightfall, effectively shutting down Wilmington's secret supply chain. With nowhere left to smuggle goods, the Confederacy's days were numbered. After the dust settled, Union troops took over Fort Fisher, using it as a prison for captured Confederate soldiers. But just when things seemed to calm down, the fort's main magazine mysteriously exploded on January 16, 1865, killing more than 200 people. Talk about an unfortunate housewarming event. And of course, no Civil War fort would be complete without a few ghosts. One of Fort Fisher's most famous spectral residents is Rose O'Neal Greenhow, aka Rebel Rose, a Confederate spy with a social life so impressive she could have run Washington, D.C.'s hottest gossip column. Born into a slave-owning family in Maryland, Rose was well-connected, counting John Calhoun, James Buchanan, and Dolly Madison among her friends. She later married Robert Greenhow, and after a stint in San Francisco's gold rush scene, where Robert tragically died, she returned to D.C. Her talent for charming, powerful men led to her acquiring top-secret Union plans, proving that sometimes pillow talk can be a powerful weapon. She was basically the 19th century version of a secret agent, only with bigger dresses and much better handwriting. Her biggest claim to fame? delivering a coded message to General Beauregard that helped him win the First Battle of Bull Run. The Union eventually caught her and thought imprisoning her along with her 8-year-old daughter would be a great idea. Turns out, this backfired spectacularly. Rose became a Confederate martyr, and even behind bars, she managed to run a spy ring. She was so good at smuggling messages that she even hid notes inside the buns of women's hair. That's next-level espionage. In 1862, she was put on trial for being a spy. Instead of pleading for mercy, she essentially said, "Hey, if you guys keep spilling secrets to me, shouldn't you be the ones on trial?" The Union, realizing they'd made her a political celebrity, released her on one condition: she had to leave the North and never come back. Rose took this as a grand exit opportunity, leaving prison literally draped in a Confederate flag. From there, she went to Europe, met with Queen Victoria and Napoleon III, wrote a bestseller about her time in prison, and campaigned for the Confederacy like it was an election year. She even returned to the U.S. carrying gold from her book sales, ready to fund the cause. Unfortunately, her journey home took a tragic turn. Her blockade-running ship ran aground near Fort Fisher in a storm, and she insisted on being rowed ashore to avoid capture. But karma, or physics, had other plans. The rowboat capsized, and the weight of the gold sewn into her clothes pulled her under. Basically, she literally sank with her money. Legend says a soldier found her washed-up body, pocketed the gold, and ran. Guilt must have gotten the best of him, though, because rumor has it he later returned the money to her estate. But Rose's spirit? It never clocked out. People still report seeing her ghost near the shore, eternally trying to complete her mission. The Atmore Oliver House, located at 511 Broad Street in New Bern, North Carolina, is a historic residence with a rich past and a reputation for being haunted. Constructed around 1790 by Samuel Chapman, a Continental Army veteran and clerk of the Craven County Superior Court, the original structure was a modest story-and-a-half frame house. After Chapman's death in 1807, the property eventually came into the possession of Isaac Taylor in 1834. Taylor significantly expanded the house around 1834 to 1835, creating the three-story structure seen today. The residence then became home to Taylor's daughter, Mary, and her husband, George Sitgreaves Atmore. The Atmore family, and subsequently the Oliver family through marriage, maintained ownership of the house for several generations. In 1951, following the death of Mary Taylor Oliver, the last private owner, the house was bequeathed to her nephews. Recognizing its historical significance, the New Bern Historical Society acquired the property, which now serves as their headquarters. The Atmore Oliver House is reputed to be one of the most haunted locations in New Bern. Reports suggest the presence of poltergeists, with theories attributing the hauntings to various sources. One speculation is that the spirits are linked to the last private owner, Mary Taylor Oliver, whose long tenure in the house may have left a lingering presence. Another theory posits that the hauntings stem from deaths during a long-ago smallpox epidemic, with the house possibly serving as a hospital during such times. Additionally, artifacts discovered during a 1962 archaeological investigation, including medical supplies in the basement, suggest the house definitely was used as a Union hospital during the Civil War, potentially contributing to its haunted reputation. Today, the Atmore Oliver House stands as a testament to New Bern's layered history, offering a glimpse into the past and the mysteries that continue to intrigue visitors and locals alike. They say truth is stranger than fiction, and sometimes it's downright paranormal. Reality throws us curveballs, nature laughs in the face of science, and certain events make us question everything we thought we knew. Take Gravity Hill in Richfield, North Carolina, where the laws of physics go on vacation. Here your car doesn't roll down the hill. Nope, it defies gravity and rolls up instead. Sounds impossible, right? So what's the deal? Ghosts? Optical illusion? Too much caffeine? Let's investigate. Legend has it that one dark night, a mother and her child were driving along Richfield Road when their car stalled. Desperate to get to safety, she got out and pushed, only for a speeding truck to come barreling through, ending both their lives instantly. But that wasn't the end of their story, because to this day, it seems like the mother is still stuck in that moment, still pushing cars up the hill, just like she tried to do that fateful night. Want proof? Try this. Park at the bottom of Gravity Hill, throw some baby powder on your trunk. Ghosts apparently don't believe in fingerprints, only handprints. And wait. Soon, your car will start rolling, uphill. By the time you reach the top, take a look at your trunk. See those little handprints? Yeah, not yours. Science might have its theories, but Gravity Hill has its fans. So the real question is, do you believe in physics or phantoms? Either way, next time you're in Richfield, maybe take a little detour. Just don't forget the baby powder. Winston-Salem came into existence in January 1753, though back then it was simply known as Salem, short, sweet, and easy to remember. Fast forward to 1837, when the historic Brookstown Inn made its debut, not as a cozy hotel, but as a bustling cotton mill. The masterminds behind this operation? The Salem Manufacturing Company, founded by the industrious Fry's family. During the mid-1800s, the South became the go-to destination for anyone looking to strike it rich in textiles, and many did. The Salem Manufacturing Company played a major role in the city's booming success. In fact, they were so ahead of the game that their mill was one of the first in the entire South to get electricity. That's right. While most people were still lighting candles, these folks were flipping switches. But as with all great tales, this one had its share of ups and downs. From 1854 through the early 1900s, the mill changed hands more times than a hot potato. Despite the chaos, it kept churning out cotton like a champ. By 1977, the massive brick building had earned its stripes as a historic landmark and landed itself a spot on the National Register of Historic Places. Today, the Brookstown Inn is a paradise for history buffs and antique lovers alike. Sitting right next to Old Salem, the city's charming historic district, this place is a dream for anyone looking to soak in the rich Moravian history and explore the area's many museums. But wait, there's more. 7 years later, in 1984, the old mill got a glow-up. Its interior was carefully reimagined to accommodate hotel rooms while preserving its historic charm. The Brookstown Inn swung open its doors that same year with 41 rooms, offering guests a chance to sleep inside a piece of history. Then in 1991, it got even better. An expansion bumped the total number of rooms up to 70. So whether you're here for the history, the architecture, or just a good night's sleep with a side of nostalgia, the Brookstown Inn has got you covered. Some folks visit the Brookstown Inn for its rich history and charming ambiance. Others? Well, they're here for the ghosts. You see, this hotel isn't just a cozy spot to rest your head, it comes with a side of the supernatural. Some believe its haunted reputation is thanks to its close proximity to Old Salem, one of Winston-Salem's most haunted locations. But let's be real, the Brookstown Inn has earned its own ghostly credentials. And once you hear the stories, you'll understand why. Back when this place was still a cotton mill, the fourth floor doubled as a makeshift dormitory for employees. One fateful evening, two female mill workers got into a heated argument. No one knows what started it. Maybe one of them borrowed a dress without asking, or perhaps they were debating whether ghosts exist. But whatever it was, it turned violent. The fight ended with one of the women shoving the other down the elevator shaft. You can probably guess how that turned out. Now, guests and staff alike report frequent encounters with a spirit known as Sally, widely believed to be the ghost of the unfortunate mill worker. People claim to see a full-bodied apparition of a woman roaming the hallways or even standing in their rooms. And if that's not unsettling enough, many guests have been jolted awake in the middle of the night by the sound of a woman screaming. More than a few have reported hearing her cry out, "Mercy, mercy!" which, let's be honest, is the last thing you want to hear in a dark, unfamiliar hotel room. Some unlucky souls have even woken up to find Sally looming over them, silently watching as they sleep. If you're feeling particularly brave, or just have questionable decision-making skills, you can book room 401, believed to be Sally's former dormitory, and one of the most paranormally active spots in the hotel. Witnesses describe her as having pale skin, wiry red hair, and wearing a gray dress. She also has a peculiar habit of patting guests' feet while they sleep, because nothing says restful night like an invisible hand tucking you in. But Sally isn't the only spirit who refuses to check out. Guests often hear the sounds of children laughing and playing in the hallways, usually in the dead of night. One couple even reported seeing two ghostly kids, a boy and a girl in old-fashioned nightshirts, running toward them before vanishing into thin air. Phantom footsteps are another common occurrence, but if you're into ghost hunting, you might want to bring a camera. Orbs frequently appear in photographs, usually hovering in corners or along the ceilings. They tend to be white or bright green, but if you're really lucky, or unlucky, Your photos might even capture the outline of a woman standing where no one living should be. And then there's the case of Eddie. Back when the building was in between identities, no longer a mill but not yet a hotel, it was used as a moving and storage facility. During renovations, a construction crew made a chilling discovery. They found a human skeleton bricked inside a wall. From that moment on, things got weird. Employees started reporting strange occurrences and nicknamed the spirit Eddie. Eddie is still making his presence known today. His footsteps echo through the lobby at night, and several guests have shared eerily similar experiences of waking up suddenly for no apparent reason. As they lay in bed trying to drift back to sleep, they'd hear someone whispering in their room, except their loved ones were still sound asleep. Upon closer inspection, they realized the voice was coming from inside the brick walls. So if you decide to spend the night at the Brookstown Inn, just know you might not be checking out alone. One guest swears that after her stay, two spirits, a young boy and a motherly woman, followed her home. The boy likes to move her car keys, and the woman whispers her name when she oversleeps. It's like having paranormal alarm clocks that don't come with a snooze button. Whether you're looking for a haunted adventure or just a cozy place to stay, the Brookstown Inn delivers both. Just don't be surprised if you wake up to a ghostly roommate watching you sleep. Well, that wraps up our terrifying tour of North Carolina's most haunted spots. I have to say, this state did not disappoint. Between the ghosts of vengeful brides, eerie abandoned hospitals, and spirits lurking in the woods, North Carolina is basically the VIP section of the afterlife. If ghosts had a travel guide, this place would have 5 stars and a warning label. Covering North Carolina has been a blast and only mildly terrifying. I mean, how many states can say they have haunted lighthouses, phantom hitchhikers, and spectral cats all in one place? It's like a supernatural buffet. You never know what kind of ghostly entity is going to show up next. If you're from North Carolina and you haven't seen a ghost yet, I honestly don't know how you've managed to avoid them. Teach me your ways. But now I need your help. Since this is the final episode of our North Carolina Hauntathon, I need to know, what state should I cover next? Should we take a ghostly road trip to Louisiana, home of voodoo and haunted plantations? Or maybe head west, where even the sunshine can't scare away the spirits? Drop your suggestions in the comments, and whichever state gives me the most nightmares, the most votes, I'll cover next. And as always, if you enjoyed this series, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a ghostly adventure. Thanks for sticking with me through all these haunted tales. See you in the next haunted state.